get absolute clarity around what it is that you mean when you say customer experience and what success looks like and how to achieve that. Is it making things simple, personable, delivering on promises, and make it simple. 3 to 5 clear action statements that if team members hear them, they intuitively know what to do. And if they do them, it will lead towards success for however you define customer experience. The second thing is to define how you're going to measure your customer experience and stick to it. One thing I find a lot is people saying, oh, well, we've changed the metric because the metric wasn't improving. You're changing the wrong thing. The metric is not the problem. And then the third step, which if you're a small business owner or a BHP of the world, you should be doing. And that's asking your customers how you performed.
Imagine being offered your dream role, heading up a completely new division and setting up a customer experience program for one of the most recognized brands on the planet. Just as a global scandal surfaces that wipes billions of dollars off its valuation and severely damages public perception and trust. That, my friends, is exactly what Jason S. Bradshaw walked into, with his eyes and arms wide open, and embraced the challenge as Volkswagen Australia's Chief Customer Officer and Director of Customer Experience. Join us as Jason talks us through how he dealt with that situation and shares those critical components of creating a world-class customer experience program in your business, no matter how big or small, that actually delivers a return on investment. For those of you that don't know Jason, he is a global strategic advisor to C-suite executives and startups, a keynote speaker on customer and employee experience, digital transformation, and leading through crises. If that isn't enough, he's also the Chief Experience and Innovation Officer for carexpert.com.au, which is Australia's fastest growing automotive media company. He has led transformative change with some of the most recognizable brands like Target, Fairfax, and Volkswagen, delivering phenomenal customer-centric growth, including over 200% increase in lead generation, 36 million in e-commerce sales in year one, and decades of customer and employee metrics improvements. He is a best-selling author on customer employee experience, a recipient of over 40 industry awards, and voted one of 30 global gurus on customer service and experience. And believe it or not, it all started when at the age of 14, he started his very first business.
Jason Bradshaw, welcome to Touchpoints. I have been looking forward to this particular interview for weeks now because you are the humble legend when it comes to customer experience and all things related. And I am chomping at the bit to suck some of that knowledge out of you. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. And to kick things off, I'd really love for you to share the 2-minute life story of Jason Bradshaw and how you got to where you are today.
Well, firstly, Glenn, thanks for having me on the podcast. Absolute pleasure to be with you and, of course, with the audience today. 2 minutes. Wow, that feels like a lot to pump at least 4 decades into. But started my first business at 14 years of age. Sounds like I wanted to be the next tech entrepreneur, billionaire, but in actual fact, I just wanted to buy stuff. And I figured I could get a part-time job or I could sell the stuff that I wanted to buy and then hopefully get that stuff cheaper. So that's what I did. And the little boy in the country couldn't compete with the big box retailers. So I competed on customer service or customer experience. And I didn't necessarily realize it at the time, but that has led to my career completely being centered around transforming how businesses operate through the way that they improve the lives of their customers and their employees. And I can remember my very early days working for a big corporate here in Australia, and we were talking about customer service. Let's fix the customer service. And of course, now I understand that really customer service is just part of customer experience. So if I was to sum it up in one or two sentences, my life's journey has been around really getting a deep understanding around the elements that make stories, the elements that inspire people to either love or hate you, and to tell people about that, and how you can harness that energy to drive a business forward.
And we were talking a little bit earlier in and around some of those experiences that you've had, and around that love-hate relationship and hate mail even. And things like that. So tell us about the early days. It fascinates me the period in your career when you were joining Volkswagen. So tell us about that, because it was right in the middle of the whole emissions scandal.
Oh, of course. 7 different industries I've had the pleasure of working in: media, government, not-for-profit, big box retail, manufacturing, automotive. The list goes on. I even helped set up a salary packaging information bureau at one stage in my very early stages of my career. And even at that time, I was there to work out this customer piece. But you're right. I joined Volkswagen just as the emissions scandal was breaking, or just shortly after that. So I can remember going through the recruitment process. The headhunter rang me one morning and said, "Have you seen the news?" And I'm like, "Yes, it's going to be a hot day." And he's like, "No, that's not the news I'm talking about." Of course, the news he was talking about was that in America it had broken, and at that stage alleged that Volkswagen had, I think the words that were being used at the time, cheated on emissions tests. And, he, like others, were wondering whether I'd still be interested in working for a company that was going through a very public scandal. And the reality is, the answer was yes. At that stage, no one knew what the facts were. Every job always has a challenge. I actually, in some ways, at least appreciated that I knew about the challenge before turning up. I think it's never easy when you get some sort of surprise at any stage in the recruitment process. But no, I believed in the product. I believed in the leadership here in Australia at Volkswagen Group Australia. And I was genuinely excited about joining a company and being its first ever chief customer officer and setting up a completely new practice and discipline within the organization. Had 6 fantastic years at Volkswagen Group Australia. And what I will say is that emissions scandal, the emissions debacle, it certainly didn't make it easy to set up a new department. It certainly didn't make it easy to get funding for all the different things that you want to do. But what it absolutely reinforced in my mind is, yes, the big multi-million-dollar programs are good to do, sometimes extremely important to do, but you can actually just start improving the lives of customers and employees straight away by getting really intentional around the actions you take. So, when I first joined Volkswagen and at that stage, there was still so many unknowns. And as you could imagine, being the world's largest automotive company at the time, there was a lot that you couldn't say. You couldn't say because you didn't have all the information and for various other legal reasons. So we had to get really intentional about how we were going to manage the situation here in Australia. Manage it for our employees, because of course they're having barbecue conversations. They've got friends and family that have probably bought product based on where they work. And then of course our dealer partners at Volkswagen, the group, the people that ultimately serve the consumer, and then the customers, the owners and drivers themselves. And so we set about just providing regular information and touch points with our customers. Scaled up a frequently asked question page, increased our contact center capability. Well, we didn't always have an answer. We always took the time to hear the question and then provide as much information as possible. And this is not the first company that I've worked in that's had some sort of scandal. It's certainly the biggest one that I've been part of, but in terms of its reach, not one part of the world wasn't touched as a result of the emissions crisis at Volkswagen Group. But I can remember when I was head of customer at Target Australia, and Target, along with many manufacturers in the country, retailers in the country, were selling jeans, denim, that were being produced overseas using a product called an azo dye. Now, ultimately, it was discovered that azo dye had some cancerous properties to it, and we had to take that product off sale in all of their stores, but also had to launch a massive recall of that product. It had distraught parents ringing saying, my child has been in your children's denim product forever and a day. Are they going to get cancer now? And so when the situation broke in the news, it was exactly the same as what we did at Volkswagen. We communicated often. We provided as much information as we possibly could, and we provided customers with absolute certainty about when we'd provide an update. And really, that's one of the keys to customer experience is communication. It's not about getting it right all the time. That's impossible to start with, but it's about giving people the trust that you're going to communicate with, and communicating in a way that they feel that you're doing so in an open and transparent way. Every crisis, every customer experience story that starts from a bad place starts there because of a lack of communication.
Yeah. So what were some of the other initiatives that over that tenure at Volkswagen you have put in place that have led to that? And the brand is solid and strong, and I think outside of the fact that it's remembered for that, and like also we were saying before, people do tend to forget that there were multiple brands that were subsequently caught out. So if we get back to that whole customer experience piece, what were some of those initiatives that you ended up putting in, and how did you evolve that experience element?
Unfortunately, we can't do this exercise, but if we could, if technology had got to the point where we could record this podcast today and then have a live interactive feedback loop with the listeners while they're listening, I'm sure if I asked everyone that was listening to the podcast, how do you define customer experience, I would get thousands, tens of thousands of variations on hopefully the one theme, but definitely variations of what customer experience means. And, if you take it up a level to experience management, well, then it's a completely different kettle of fish. But the very first thing that I went about doing when we established customer experience as a discipline within the group was establishing what we meant by customer experience and what were the core elements of achieving that. Quite often in an organization, there'll be, some corporate goals, some corporate values, but people won't actually know what's required to achieve them. What does great look like? So whether you were a sales consultant on the floor of a dealership or the receptionist in the headquarters, everyone in the organization painstakingly at times, I'm sure, knew what we meant by customer experience and knew what our customer experience principles were that ultimately led to a great experience, one that was shareable, one that was worthy of the brand. And they were really simple, easy to understand. You don't need to make things complicated, So when we describe what customer experience is, and then we first launched 5 customer experience principles, and be simple was one of those. Make it easy. You can say to someone, make things easy, and even if they don't necessarily know every element of the business, in their own little way, in their own little role or big role, whatever it might be, they can find ways to make it simpler for the customer, right? And so it wasn't about putting billboards up and posters up because that just becomes wallpaper. It was about ensuring that these principles, these customer experience principles, were embedded into every single conversation so that they became a way of working. I would handwrite and sign a note of thanks to about a dozen team members across the dealership network and the company each week for the first year, saying, congratulations on making it easy for the customer or for communicating well. And that was about reinforcing the behaviors, the mindset that we were trying to create. Now, in the first year, as you could imagine, budgets weren't, flowing easily, and nor should they actually. I think customer experience should, less like any other department, have to fight and justify the investment. And they should also have a return on that investment. But in that first year, when the department was set up 3/4 through a financial year, so that alone created a budget a challenge for everyone. But we immediately got to work. So every time I hopped in front of an audience, it was, this is what we mean by customer experience, and here are the 5 customer experience principles. Every single data point that I talked about was linked back to one of those experience principles. One of the things that people who have followed me will know, is that, and I've said it time and time again publicly, is that those dealerships that followed our customer experience objectives, our customer experience principles, on average, made double the profit of those dealerships that didn't. And there was no rocket science behind it. Yes, of course, we analysed the data of what customers were saying to us, but it's not like we had a dozen data scientists crawling over the data for years on end to come up with these 5 experience principles. It was myself and my two of my core team members that sat down and came up with them. And then we reinforced those messages, made it really simple for everyone in the organization to understand what those were, and rewarded the behavior. And just, as I said, painstakingly for audience members at times, I'm sure, just kept reinforcing them. And that led to, or was the start of what I should say, one of the most significant improvements in customer experience that the Volkswagen Group and specifically the Volkswagen brand had in Australia in the decade prior, or since its time in the country, in fact. So, the first lesson for anyone listening is define what you mean by customer experience. It doesn't have to be what everyone else says. Just define what it means for your organization. And what are those 3 to 5 things that intuitively, when people hear it, they'll understand and be able to take action on it so that they can move you forward to delivering a better experience. Now, I simply started with that, but there were many programs that we ran over the years. And about 5 years in, we did a refresh of our core messages. And it resulted in the Volkswagen Way pocket card, or the experience standards. Now, this was inspired by the likes of the Ritz-Carlton Group. But in here, in this little pocket card that fits perfectly in a wallet or in your pocket, talks about what is the Volkswagen difference. What are the 3 simple things that we expect every team member to do every time? Greet, guide, and show gratitude. And then what do we promise to our customers? Now, we originally had 5 experience principles. And when we did the refresh, we summed that down into 3 promises. We make it simple, we make it personal, and we make it happen. And the one thing that those 3 promises all share in common is that they're deeply human and emotive. And why a promise as opposed to a principle? Well, there are a lot of principles in the world that a lot of guides and rules, and lots of people find greatness to break or just quite frankly break them, right? But I'm unlikely, the human psyche is unlikely to break a promise that they've made to someone. So we wanted to take that emotional human drivers and embed those into the language that we were using when we were talking about customer experience. And really, if we took that next step up, although I was the chief customer and marketing officer, in fact, when I left, but ultimately, customer experience was just part of the broader experience management. Customer was in my title, but our programs were very much focused on the employee experience, the brand experience, and the product experience. Because in actual fact, if you're not looking at all of those disciplines, then there's always going to be increased friction, and ultimately you want to remove friction and create moments of joy.
Yeah, and I love that use of the promise, because a promise is so much more than words on a wall.
Yeah.
You did mention about return and getting a return on these sorts of programs and measuring different aspects of it. How did you do that?
Well, I am a massive fan of making sure that customer experience or experience management professionals find a way to link their activities to a commercial outcome.
Yep.
The reason I'm a fan of it is because from my experience, the more times you can speak to a CFO about your impact to the dollar line in a positive way, the more likely they are to give you money. And I'm sure many of the listeners, I know myself, have led teams that have been seen as pure cost centers, and how difficult it is to get any investment whatsoever. And ultimately, investment is always needed in every part of the business. So there are a number of ways that we prove that return on investment. If I think about our contact center, the Volkswagen contact center at the time, when I started, there was, say, 20 to 25 people. Let's go with 25 people in that contact center. They had an average response time of somewhere in the order of 90 days. So not award-winning performance is perhaps the kind way to put it. Some great individuals, absolutely within the team. But what did they lack? They lacked clear direction. They lacked a system that enabled efficiencies and a culture that enabled resolving the problem, creating moments of joy versus just processing a transaction. If I look at the investment in that contact center alone, new CRM system, new phone system, new team member recruitment processes, new team member scheduling processes. That's just to name a few. Anyone that's gone out there and bought Salesforce or any other CRM will know that we're talking about millions of dollars of investment in a contact center. Now, I can't recall the exact numbers, but that team of 25, when I joined the organization, was serving about 20,000 customer touch points a year. By the time I left that organization, the contact center was serving over 100,000 customer touch points a year, still with 25 people. And in addition to that increased efficiency, we stopped outsourcing our social media, community management, and other activities. You have to know that every single opportunity I had to talk about the commercial impacts of that investment, I took them. Yep. If I take the dealerships, it's not uncommon in Australia for automotive manufacturers to track the profitability of dealerships. A profitable dealership community is good for consumers and good for the brand. We've simply overlaid on top of that, how are they performing against our customer and employee metrics? As far as I know, I'm still the only person in Australian history to mandate an employee experience survey of employees in dealerships, of independent businesses that I have no direct control over. But we were able to get the commitment and the buy-in from the dealer community around that because we had done the work in previous years around joining the dots between customer and employee experience and the power that had in multiplying efficiencies and ultimately profitability for the individual dealerships. And at an individual level, their own performance pay packet, if they were on a performance pay packet. I also took away in that time, it's not all roses, but depending on which side you look at it, but when I joined the company, they were paying out over $10 million a year in bonuses to dealers. I took those bonuses completely away. Paying someone to be nice to customers just is bizarre. And there's research by Forrester, which actually showed that incentivizing a customer outcome based incentivizing individuals with pay from a pay perspective based on customer outcomes or an NPS score, if you like, actually doesn't achieve anything because there is no intrinsic cultural driver to do the right thing. And it just becomes the lost money opportunity or how to game the system. Taking $10 million a year out of the business in bonuses is yet another way that I showed commercial benefits. Ultimately, for the listeners, decide on what is that one customer metric that you're going to hang your hat on. I'm a big fan of Net Promoter Score, but that doesn't mean it's right for your organization. There's many organizations where NPS is actually, in my opinion, the wrong metric. But let's just say it's Net Promoter Score. So to find that, measure it broadly. So understand the NPS of every department if possible. And what is the commercial impact of when that NPS score improves? It's not a perfect science in that model, but it's an easy model that you'll be able to access the data on and start to have the conversation. And you will find that over time, the CFO will get a lot more interested in opening the book, so to speak, to how to link the data. And quite frankly, you shouldn't be scared of that because if you're doing the right thing, and by the right thing, I mean improving the lives of your employees and your customers, the dollars, they come. You just need to always be conscious that you're not spending more than you're increasing.
Absolutely. Good opportunity then to fast forward a little bit to the car expert experience centres. And it sounds like I'm turning you into the car guy. But really, it seems like a natural progression. And I love this concept. Tell me a little bit about that and how you ended up getting involved in this.
Yeah, so carexpert.com.au is Australia's fastest growing automotive media company. Founded by three individuals who had previously founded a company called Car Advice. But Car Expert is a consumer-first media company that really is trying to deliver value beyond impressions and clicks. And that's really how the Car Expert Experience Centre came to life. For your listeners, the Car Expert Experience Centre is a physical space, think inside a major retail mall, where you can go and discover your next vehicle, touch, play, learn about all the new technology, go on a test drive. But unlike going to a dealership, the people that you're speaking to can't sell you a car. So there is absolutely no pressure on you to buy. In fact, you can't buy because Car Expert is not a retailer. Secondly, everyone that's employed there is employed by Car Expert, whose sole job is to help you decide what's right for you. No sales target. No, we have to sell the blue car today because that's the one we've got in stock. No other colors are available forever. A really comfortable environment for you to take your time. And it came out of some research that the organisation undertook that really spoke to the fact that consumers invest a lot of time in researching their next car purchase. For many people, it's their second biggest purchase ever. And of course, unlike a house that appreciates in value, that's usually not the case with a car. So it's a big step for many people. And many people here, well, at least here in Australia, the average ownership cycle of a car is almost 10 years now. So you're not buying something that you're going to replace in a year or two. So for many people, it's a big decision. And because of the length of time between the last purchase and the new purchase, there's a lot of technology that's changed and terms that you might not understand. So we understood that while people were doing much more research online, there was still a gap in the market. And that gap in the market was this unbiased physical experience that gave people confidence in their decision. Where quite often when you walk into a dealership, and I understand why this would be the case, but you walk into a Volkswagen dealership, it would be extremely rare for a Volkswagen sales consultant to say, I'm not going to sell you a car today because you actually should go and buy the Toyota. It just wouldn't happen. I'm sure it could happen, but it's not the standard operating model. So we wanted to create that safe zone, that space, if you like, so that people could gain the confidence to make the decision that was right for them, and then introduce them to a dealer. Their right dealer, their closest dealer, the dealer that they trusted, if they wanted to make that purchase. And I don't know about you, Glenn, but when I was a kid, it was quite common for mum and dad when they were thinking about buying a car that you would, hop in the car, you would go to the end of a street and you walk the whole street looking at all the different brands. Across the world, that doesn't happen anymore. On average, consumers go to less than 2 dealerships before they place an order. And when I say less than 2, the number is like 1.2 dealership visits, 1.3 dealership visits. So there remained that gap because they weren't going and actually touching and feeling. And so the brands that participate in the experience centers, the benefits for them are that they actually get to have their vehicle stand up against their direct competitors. And the reality is that while a Mitsubishi, for example, might not be the car for me, it is the car for other people. And likewise, the car that is for me, say the Volkswagen, isn't the right car for other people. So by providing that really brand agnostic, sales-free environment, we deliver that confidence level that lets consumers make that next step and make that next step faster than perhaps they would have if they just kept going online. I buy the latest technology that comes out all the time. I created an online sales platform at Volkswagen that delivered over $36 million of revenue in its first 9 months. I am absolutely pro technology, but there is just something about opening and shutting a door and hearing the thud, the seeing the size of the screen, opening and closing the boot to see whether it would fit into your lifestyle.
How big is the coffee cup holder?
How big is the coffee cup holder? Absolutely. And when you go online, you don't get those physical touch points, the physical experiences, but you also can go down a rabbit hole that ultimately doesn't serve you. I recently bought a Tesla, and what a unique buying experience that is. But in the process of deciding to buy the Tesla, I joined a number of Tesla owner pages on communities on Facebook. Well, I could have spent the next year just trying to decide who to listen to. Everyone's got their, oh my gosh, this is the reason to buy, and everyone's got the very same reason as a reason not to buy. And whether it's Tesla or Mitsubishi or BMW or Ford, every brand has those raving fans and those perhaps purchases that aren't happy. And so I think the easiest way to fast track to that confidence is the Car Expert Experience Centre. And really delighted about what we're doing with them this year. We will be opening our next one in April or May, and then very closely after that, a second one will be opening up as well. But who knows? They won't just be sticking around in Australia. We'll be taking the Car Expert Experience Centres further abroad, because there is that genuine need from consumers for the touch and feel in a safe, confident building way.
That is absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate it. And before we wrap up, I think just a real opportunity to get those little extra grains of nuggets out of you and around whether you're a seasoned customer experience professional or whether you're starting off, what are some of the core tenets that you consistently talk about? Because I know from my experience, and actually you were referring to it a little bit before, it's just that relentless communication and making sure that we follow through on what we say that we're going to say. So, what are some of those core things that you always recommend that we do when it comes to improving that experience, both of our customers and our employees?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is get absolute clarity around what it is that you mean when you say customer experience and what success looks like and how to achieve that. Is it making things simple, personable, delivering on promises, and make it simple. 3 to 5 clear action statements that if team members hear them, they intuitively know what to do. And if they do them, it will lead towards success for however you define customer experience. The second thing is to define how you're going to measure your customer experience. It does not have to be Net Promoter Score, or customer effort score, or it could be a combination, but define what it is and stick to it. One thing I find a lot is people saying, oh, well, we've changed the metric because the metric wasn't improving. You're changing the wrong thing. The metric is not the problem. So that's define what it is, define what customer experience is and 3 to 5 things on how to achieve it, define how to measure it. And then the third step, which if you're a small business owner or a BHP of the world, you should be doing. And that's asking your customers how you performed. I can remember when I started at Target, I literally got out my credit card and went to delighted.com and signed up for a very simple survey, which was, on a scale of 0 to 10, the traditional NPS question, and why'd you give that score? They were the only questions I could ask on this platform. I had to manually upload an Excel spreadsheet every day to send out the surveys, and the response rates were okay, but they certainly weren't phenomenal. And of course, I've used enterprise-grade systems like Qualtrics, which I absolutely love. But at the end of the day, every organization needs to be asking customers at least one question. How did we go today? And if you want to go for a second question, what would we do differently to make your day better? And then do something with that data. And I don't mean do something with that data in the most senior parts of the organization. Yes, they need to know the data, absolutely. But every single call center operator should know how he or she is improving the lives of customers every single day, because knowledge now enables them to improve things. If there's 10 things that they're not doing right and they don't know about them, they've got zero chance of improving any of them. But if they know that there's 10 things that they're not doing right and they start improving in just one area, then over time they'll have improved all 10 and that won't be a problem anymore. So define what it is, define how you're going to measure it, and then ask your consumers, 1 to 2 questions as a minimum to really understand how you're performing. And then the fourth thing is take action on what your consumer is saying. I know that sounds like absolute, simple, obvious things. But there are people that hold great titles in big organizations that get absolutely tied up on, let's spend 3 years collecting data and then taking action. Well, you don't have the time to wait. Your competitors will eat you for breakfast. every single day have a discipline of looking at what the data is telling you and make small steps to improve, to reduce those errors, to genuinely create a culture that makes a difference to customers, that wants to make a difference to customers and employees. And the final thing, if you don't know where to start, if you have absolutely no idea of what to do, just ask your employees, because every single day they're getting feedback directly from consumers about what the consumer loves or hates about your organisation.
Yeah, absolute fantastic advice. And time again, it amazes me that no matter how far up the food chain you go in an organisation, the fundamentals always hit home.
Indeed. One bonus for everyone listening, while I was at Volkswagen, we created 3 books. The first was called 100 Ways to Wow. Now, Macy's in the US created 100 Ways to Deliver Magic, or the Macy's Magic, it might have been called. Can't remember the exact title. But in this book, the 100 Ways to Wow, and there's 2 other versions of it, there are literally statements on a page like a fond farewell. Make sure it's the right time to say goodbye. Ask if your customers have any requests or questions first. Nothing in this book is rocket science. But when you take the time to create it with intention, you give people 100 pieces of advice or inspiration on how to deliver an experience, and they get it wrong, you can simply go up to them with your book and say, can you tell me, how did you tailor that experience for your consumer? How did you make it? How did you personalize the greeting? And you go from being this rule enforcing individual to someone that's trying to foster a culture of continuous improvement and one of coaching and empowerment. And in the process, you also have something that's really great for just reinforcing what the company stands for. Every single day, the hardest job a customer experience professional has is to constantly, every day, deliver the same message in a different way so that it gets heard.
And on that magical note, we will wrap it up. We are going to put all of your contact details in the show notes. But for those that are just on audio, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So my website, jasonsbradshaw.com, and I'm Jason S. Bradshaw on all the popular channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc.
Fantastic. Well, you've got another avid follower now anyway.
Thanks so much.
Love it. Hey, really appreciate it, and looking forward to catching up again in the very near future. Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening into this episode, which is made possible by the team at touchpointgroup.com, the customer intelligence company you can partner with to rapidly translate your customer feedback data into actionable insights that will enable you to prioritize actions that make a demonstrable difference. You'll find a link to their website in the show notes. Thanks again. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and see you soon.